Okay, so that last video was kind of negative. And I don't like talking about negative things. Like, when I talk about music, I want to talk about the stuff that I like, the really good stuff. And after talking about a band like Iced Earth, I needed something that would make me happy. I needed a band that would just, lift my spirits back up. And honestly, there are a lot of bands that I could have talked about. I could have talked about Rush. I could have talked about The Deer Hunter. I could have talked about King's X. I saw Between the Buried and Me about a week ago. I could have talked about them. But then I realized something. Every band that I've talked about so far has had a discography that goes into double digits. Why not just pick a band that has, only a few albums this time? And immediately, I thought of Jane's Addiction. I had always known of this band because of my father, but I didn't really truly check these guys out until, my senior year of college. And I became obsessed with this band. Seriously, they were on rotation in my library just non-stop. And the good news is, they only have 4 albums. Technically 5, but we'll get to that. So yeah, this video might actually be a lot shorter than the other ones. So let's stop beating around the bush. Let's talk about Jane's Addiction. Okay, so some of you might be a bit confused as to why I'm starting with this album instead of Nothing's Shocking. Okay, after all, this is a live album, not a studio album. So why would I start with this? 2 main reasons. One, this was the first release they had on a major label, so I feel like this counts. Second, and this is honestly the bigger reason, out of the 10 songs on this album, only 2 make it onto Nothing's Shocking. Pigs and Zen, and Jane Says. I mean, yeah, songs like Trip Away, 1%, I Would For You, and My Time would see official recordings in the future, but that wouldn't be until the mid to late 2000s. So yeah, it might be a live album, but I feel like this is very important to their history. How about the album itself? It's good. I dig it a lot. Because it's mostly recorded live with very little studio overdubs, there's a more raw feeling to this album that you don't get on their later records. And a lot of the songs on here are really good as well. Trip Away, Whores, 1%, this album's version of Piggins In, this album's version of Jane Says. It's really good. I wouldn't make this your first listen though. As much as I liked it, I feel like you wouldn't appreciate this as much until you listen to their other records. So yeah, overall, not a bad starting point for this band, but don't make this your first listen. Instead, make the next one your first listen. Nothing's Shocking by Jane's Addiction is one of the greatest debut albums ever made. I will not be taking questions at this point. Okay, that's a very bold claim to make, but come on, you guys name a better debut album than this. Okay, that's fair. But I stand by the fact that Nothing's Shocking deserves to be up there with these records. This album, holy shit, guys. Perry's voice on this album is so unique and different from a lot of the other bands at the time. I still haven't heard a guy sing like Perry. Dave will go down in history as one of the most underappreciated guitarists of all time. More people know him for Ink Master and all this other reality show stuff. But this guy is one of the best guitarists I think a lot of people don't know about. Steven's drumming on this album is the perfect mix of rock, funk, punk, and it's so good. But the best part of this album, in my opinion, is easily Eric Avery's bass playing. If Dave will go down in history as one of the most underappreciated guitarists, Eric is the most underappreciated bass player I think I've heard in a very long time. The bass lines this guy plays on this record are so good. So, what are the standout tracks on this album? Yes. I don't make this claim lightly. The only last album I've done this with was 10 by Pearl Jam. There are no bad songs on this record. If I had to pick my favorites, Ocean Size, Had a Dad, Mountain Song, Jane Says, Pigs and Zen. But that's not to say anything less about the other tracks on this album. Up the Beach is one hell of an opening track. This doesn't kick the door down, it knocks it off its hinges. Ted Just Admitted is one of the more experimental songs on this album, and has such a good build throughout. Starts off kind of nice, unassuming, and towards the end it gets more and more intense and intense, and it honestly becomes kind of terrifying at the end, and I love it for that. Sitting in the shower thinking, it's a silly song, but I can't help but love it. Idiot's Rule has like a nice like ska influence on it, you know, the hard rock alt metal side, but then just horns. How do you think of stuff like that? But easily the most underrated track on this album has to be Summertime Rules. This song embodies everything I love about this band. When this band wanted to go hard, you got songs like Ocean Size and Mountain Song. When this album wants to get experimental, you get Ted Just Admitted and the ending to Pigs and Zen. When this album wanted to get sentimental, you get Jane Says and Summertime Rules. Honestly, the only track here that this album could have done without is Thank You Boys, the little like minute-long interlude. But when a minute-long interlude is so good that you learn how to play it on guitar, that should tell you how good this album is. Honestly, I don't know how else I can say this, but this album is a near-perfect album for me. If there's one album you listen to by this band, you have to make it Nothing's Shocking. Though, honestly, I could say the same about its follow-up as well. Okay, but we can all agree that Ritual to Lo Habitual is one of the best sophomore albums ever, right? I mean, surely nothing can top... Why do you feel the need to do that? All joking aside, Ritual was fantastic. This is another fucking amazing album. I wouldn't say it's as good as Nothing Shocking, but that's kind of like saying $999 is not as good as $1,000. I mean, technically you're right, but come on. Everything I love about Nothing Shocking is on here. Harry's voice, Dave's guitar playing, Steven's drumming, Eric's bass lines. I honestly think they're better here than they were on Nothing Shocking. And the songs themselves, they're just all fantastic. Stop, No One's Leaving, Ain't No Right, Obvious, Been Caught Stealing, Of Course, Classic Girl. They're just so good. But if there are two songs on this record that I need to talk about, it's 3 Days and Then She Did. Let's talk about Then She Did first. This song in some ways reminds me a lot of Ted Just Admitted with its build up to an amazing climax. The difference is though, with Ted Just Admitted, it's terrifying. So much tension and just, yeah, it's an intense ending with Ted Just Admitted. With Then She Did, it's intense, but it's a different kind of intense. It's almost cathartic. This feels like someone finally letting go. This song is amazing. This is one of the best songs this band has ever written. And then you have 3 Days. How do I say this? Okay, if Then She Did is one of the best songs this band's ever written, 3 Days is the best song this band has ever written. I don't even really know how to describe this song. Okay, I got it. If you guys have never heard this song before, pause this video, listen to the song like at least 3 times, because you're not going to get it the first time. Listen to the song, then come back here. I'll wait. You back? Enough said, right? This album is friggin' great. I love it so much. And then the band had to go and break up. Yeah, like shortly after this album came out, like about a year or 2 later, the band broke up. Members would go on to do like no other things. Eric would be part of various side projects. Perry and Steven would form a new band called Porno for Pyros. I was actually kind of tempted to talk about them in this video, but both bands are just completely different from each other, so it wouldn't make much sense. I think the most notable thing anyone did was when Dave joined the Red Hot Chili Peppers for a brief period. He only put out 1 album with them, One Hot Minute, and that is one of the most criminally underrated albums in the Peppers catalog. The band would get back together in like '97 for like a brief reunion tour, only without Eric on bass. I think in any other case that would be blasphemous, but considering that they had Flea fill in for him, I'd say it works out pretty well. After that, they just kind of broke up again, and we didn't really hear anything else from this band. Until 2003. Okay, I'm not going to do the joke about, oh, name a better third album than this, and then chop a bunch of good third albums. Because honestly, there are better albums than Strays. I'm just going to say it. There was no way this album was going to live up to expectations. Their first album in over 13 years, had a few outside co-writers on it, has no Eric Avery on it whatsoever. It also doesn't really help that after this album came out, the band would break up again. So yeah, with that information in mind, that Strays is a bad album, right? No. No, actually, Strays is good. Strays is actually really good. It's funny because this album in some ways is like the black sheep of the catalog. Like, people talk about Nothing's Shocking and Ritual, and they'll talk about the next album more because we'll get to that one. But for whatever reason, a lot of people just kind of forget about Strays. And that really sucks because Strays is actually fantastic. The production on here is really nice and crisp. I mean, it's to be expected. It's Bob Ezrin producing. His stuff always sounds good. Some of the riffs on this album, like, okay, this is probably the heaviest album this band has made so far in terms of the riffs. I've seen people call this like their nu metal album, and while I don't necessarily agree with that statement, I definitely get where they're coming from. And Steven's drumming is fantastic. Dave's guitar playing is fantastic. Perry's voice has shown its age a little bit, but he still sounds great. I know I said earlier that Flea is the only bass player who could truly replace Eric, but Chris Chaney does a fantastic job. He is like a worthy successor to Eric Avery. A lot of the songs on this record are just fantastic as well. Honestly, just like that first half of the album is just like all killer. True Nature, Strays, Just Because, Price I Pay, Superhero, The Riches. Okay, question. Why don't more people talk about The Riches? This is like one of the best deep cuts this band has, period. I remember I was talking with my dad about this song, and he actually made the claim that he thinks it's their best song since 3 Days. I wouldn't go that far, especially seeing as how a song like Then She Did exists. But the point stands, The Riches is fantastic, give it a listen if you haven't already. But I think what I loved the most about this record is that despite all the years apart and all the different projects the members would do, this still feels like a Jane's Addiction record. Now, having said all of that, this album has its issues. First issue, and keep in mind this is like a very small and insignificant issue. We can all agree that album cover is bad, right? Especially when you compare it to Nothing's Shocking and Ritual. Yeah, this album cover is just not very good. I know I praised the production earlier, but my only real complaint with it is Dave's guitar sound. These are some really heavy and punchy riffs, and I feel like they would have been more impactful if the production was, emphasize that a little bit more. As awesome as Chris is on this album, you do kind of feel Eric's absence here. I praised the first half of the album, but the second half, starting with Wrong Girl, kind of going to the end, while those songs aren't necessarily bad, they don't really stand out in any way either. And of course, there's the big one, and I mentioned this earlier. Coming off of Nothing's Shocking and Ritual, yeah, this album could be seen as a disappointment. Despite all of that, Strays is a good album. You guys should definitely check it out. So, funny story. About 2 years ago, I remember I was talking with somebody about Jane's Addiction, and we got onto the topic of their albums. And we came to the same conclusions. Nothing's Shocking and Ritual de Lo Habitual are full-blown classics. Strays, while having some issues, is still really damn good. And The Great Escape Artist exists. Yeah, guys, ugh. Before I say anything else, let's talk about some positives. The production on this album is really good. I think this is the best sounding album they've got yet. It feels kind of moot to talk about the performances on a Jane's Addiction record, but, everyone still is playing really well. And I'll admit, there are some songs on here that I think worked really well. Underground, Into the Lies, Irresistible Force, that song grew on me like a motherfucker. And yeah, that's about it. Yeah. The list of negatives is a little longer. For starters, and again, like with Strays, it's more of a petty, insignificant issue. I still don't think that album cover is very good. The guy on it is like, no, just get that thing away from me, please. I mentioned on Strays how you felt Eric's absence, and you feel it here as well. Only you really feel it on this album, jeez. Unlike Strays though, where Dave was all over that album, Dave barely has a presence here, and I don't understand why. Outside of the 3 songs I mentioned, there's really nothing else on this album I would go back to and listen. But I think my biggest issue with this album has to be the direction they went with it. See, the thing is, Jane's Addiction, when they wanted to be artsy, they could absolutely pull it off. I mean, if you want good examples of that, just listen to Nothing Shocking in Ritual. But at least with those albums, they still have like their heavy rocking moments. This one, it's not until like the last song on the album where we actually get a full-blown true rock song. This album is an artsy album. I guess for Perry that means it's an excuse to try to be as fucking weird as possible. Weird and pretentious. That's the pot calling the kettle black. This record thinks it has more to say than it really does. And of course, this goes without saying, compared to the previous records I've done, even compared to Strays, yeah, this is just not very good. Would I say it's a bad album? Not really. This album has its fans, and if you like this album, more power to you. But I think I can safely say that this is the worst album Jane's Addiction has made. So, remember when this was going to be a short video? Yeah, I guess I had more to say about this band than I thought I did. Yeah, if you guys couldn't tell, I absolutely love this band. They're one of my favorite bands from the late 80s, early 90s. If you want to get into Jane's Addiction, yeah, Nothing's Shocking, all the way. Also make sure to check out Ritual, but at the very least, listen to that debut album. This album is... oh my god. It's been a while since we've heard anything from this band. Like, The Great Escape Artist came out in 2011. On the one hand, I'm a little upset by that because I love this band, I want to hear more from them. But on the other hand, I am totally fine with what we have. And if all this video does is make people check out Jane's Addiction, I am more than happy with that. I'm going to try to do like one of these videos at least once a month. And so the next one you'll be seeing will be coming out in April. I'm going to give you a small hint as to who this band is. They're a metal band from France that isn't Gojira. Good luck. Thank you guys for making it to the end of the video, and I'll see you guys next time. You know, one of these days I'm going to find a way to end these videos that's not going to involve me getting cut off